Very pleased not to be joined by the one and only, the legendary. I say this all the time, but in this case, it is actually true. The internationally famous, my very good friend. I love my job, but one of the only people that I work with who I have actually met and worked with in person from SB Nation's Pat's Pulpit. It is Bernd Buchmasser. I struggle every time. I was so nervous about it, Bernd.
Yeah, it was really good. It was actually like one of the better ones I've heard so far. So
Yeah. Well, give it to us.
kudos,
You say it for me, please.
Buchmasser.
Man,
But that's
that was
like the native pronunciation, and I understand that it's not easy to do.
sure.
So anything that comes close to that is actually not that bad. I've,
So
I've heard I've heard everything.
so you go to like the doctor or like some sort of appointment and they call you. Do they say it that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like or like well then that makes me feel really small. This was living in my
No,
head
no,
rent free all week and I botched it. I feel like, B plus effort, but I wanted an A.
I mean, it's always next time.
That's true.
Like the Patriots and Cowboys are scheduled to meet in like I don't know 4 years again, unless
Well,
I
unless
don't know if that will happen.
I know the unless that you were baking in, but there is also the 17th game, which is how they
Yeah.
met last time when they met
So
in
yeah,
2021. That's what we're here to talk about is the
yeah.
Cowboys hosting the Patriots on Sunday. Bernd is amazing. Everybody follow him and check him out. We'll throw his Twitter handle and everything. And everybody check out Pat's Pulpit, SB Nation's home for New England Patriots content. You've all heard Bernd here before. You heard him in the lead up to that game. It's been an interesting 2 years since the Cowboys last saw the Patriots, Bernd. That was I would say still at the beginning of the Tom Brady departure. Obviously, a lot more time has passed, a lot more turnover. Zeke Elliott is now, switched sides as far as this particular game is concerned. Overall thoughts on the Patriots, because I feel like you've probably dealt with a lot of Patriots fans who have come to terms with life as a mortal, right? Like you've just become like a normal NFL team as opposed to the exception.
I'm not sure if the Patriots are ever a normal NFL team as long as Bill Belichick is running things because, like, for once, I would like to get the inactives list on time and things like that. But that's a different story for another time. That time being Sunday, 1.5 hours before kickoff. But yeah, I mean, the Patriots are still in a rebuild, I would say. They, like, obviously losing the greatest quarterback of all time is not an easy
Mm-hmm.
thing to replace. But the Patriots also had a lot of coaching turnover over the last few years, and they did make the playoffs in 2021 when
Right.
they last played the Cowboys. They lost to the Cowboys, then went on to make the playoffs, then went on to get absolutely smacked by the Buffalo Bills. Um, but I think the fact that they returned to the playoffs so quickly after losing Tom Brady, it's year two after Brady's departure, kind of warped the perception of what this team is a bit. But in my opinion, it was still part of a rebuild, and they still are rebuilding. Even though they have a really good defense, and they are still a playoff caliber team, I would say, if everything clicks. But it's not really the Patriots that we used to be. Absolutely because of Brady not being there, of course, but also they they make a lot of mistakes that Patriots teams of past years would not have made. Um, they're like a few, like they haven't stood apart for a few years now, and that's something that I think a lot of Patriots fans have to get used to. A lot of people covering the team have got to get used to, but it's still a fun team to cover. It's still an interesting team. It's still a talented team. But that said, as I mentioned, it's still a team in the rebuilding process. Maybe still for another year.
We've never talked basketball, but I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, and so I kind of get it. You know what I mean? Like what it's like when you go from just like sustained greatness to just like, wow, we just like exist now. This sucks. And the Spurs, went through a really hard time and seem to be on the come up thanks to Wemby. Obviously, we'll see how that goes. But I understand that there's a hard like self reckoning that surely has to happen for everybody involved. And I get your point. This is something that Brandon Gotton and I were talking about with the Giants. When you have a really successful season in the early part of a rebuild, it does manipulate or change expectations, right? Because people think you're further along in the rebuild than you might actually be because you're a playoff team, and that does, I think, make people a little bit more unstable than they normally are. I think the greatest evidence of that was a Monday night game last year against Chicago with the Bailey Zappi game, and everybody was like, "Oh, this is it now!" Like, boom, like it all happened finally. Like the magic is back. Whatever. It's like, just chill out. Just take a second, take a breath. I think that's a really fair overall estimate of the Patriots. And I think Mac Jones has kind of been the perfect quarterback for this weird little transition period, right? Like a guy who's kind of helped the team tread water and stay relevant as they kind of figure out how to operate as a franchise without, to your point, the greatest quarterback of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you put yourself in Mac Jones' shoes, it's not an easy position to be in. Yes, he is playing with a very good coaching staff, but also you got to follow Tom Brady. You cannot win. That's the biggest shoes you can ever follow in the NFL is Tom Brady, and I don't know, I feel like he's doing a good job. He's still a young quarterback. He's still a developing quarterback, but the dynasty years in New England left a lot of scars in a way that every quarterback now needs to be Brady, and that's just not realistic. No quarterback is Tom Brady. Like Patrick Mahomes might be Tom Brady one day or in the same sphere, but nobody is Tom Brady. And having to come in and take on the burden of replacing that guy while still being responsible for rebuilding offense, a rebuilding team, is not an easy thing to do. And as you said, I feel like Mac Jones is a good quarterback for the process. Mm-hmm. He went to a big school. Like Alabama is arguably the Patriots version of college football to a degree, especially with the Nick Saban connection. That's an easy one to make. But he has been he's been in the spotlight before he joined the Patriots, much more than other players. Like Trey Lance was in the spotlight. Cowboys legendary backup quarterback Trey Lance. Like I feel like the spotlight was a different one for him when he came out of North Dakota State, because it's not that big of a university. Right. And he played a lot of good football. He was an early round draft pick, or an early first round draft pick even. But it's a different pressure that you're under compared to playing for Alabama and playing for the national championship every year, with that being the expectation. Now coming to a New England team that has similar expectations, even though those expectations are not yet to be satisfied from that rebuilding standpoint that I was talking about.
That's really fair. And I think it's hard. It's really rare that like Brock Purdy shows up, you know what I mean? Like has no real experience playing on this big stage and then just kind of dominates or whatever. There's examples to fit every idea in NFL history. I do think that because of the lesser amount of attention that's paid to the Patriots these days from a national perspective. Like you mentioned, like we're just in a new era. There's like newer players and newer things. Like all anybody has talked about all week long has been Travis Kelce and the Chiefs and Taylor Swift and everything, blah, blah, blah. I do think that Matthew Judon is a little bit underrated from a national level. Last year when Micah Parsons was chasing the sack title, I vividly remember the Cowboys went into a Sunday night game against the Colts and they would go on to wax them. But the Thursday night before, Matthew Judon didn't have a single sack, which opened the door for Micah to take the lead as the sack leader. He didn't do that, but my point was, it wasn't until really that moment that I was like, man, Judon's really like stacking these up. I mean, like, and again, like because the Patriots aren't in our face all the time, I do think that, Mac Jones gets a lot of the headlines because he's the quarterback and he's somewhat controversial. But Judon is a kind of underrated, one of the best defensive players in the NFL sort of player.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a tone setter for a defense that is really, really good. The thing with the Patriots is, even though Bill Belichick is arguably the greatest defensive mind in NFL history, it was Tom Brady. It was the Tom Brady show in New England. Like, how many players besides Tom Brady, maybe Rob Gronkowski, maybe Julian Edelman, because he won a Super Bowl MVP award, can you really name from those Patriots teams that won those Super Bowls? It was more like a collective effort without having those big star players. And Judon falls into kind of a different category. He is a star. He is one of the best edge defenders in all of football. But now that the Patriots are not that exposed, like you just said, he's really flying a bit under the radar. The same is true for other players on this defense. Like Kyle Duggar is one of the better safeties in football, but he's not a household name. Javon Bentley, one of the best off-ball linebackers, he's not a household name. And given that there's so much focus on the quarterback position and on the players who play quarterback, even if you're a great player at what you do, you kind of get overshadowed to a degree. And that's not just the quarterback position, like the passing game in general. And I know Judon is very disruptive. I think he has 4 sacks already this season, and a safety against Zach Wilson, the great Jets quarterback we all love.
You guys have had some fun with the Zach Wilson stuff this week at Pat's Pulpit. So
yeah, but that's a whole different story. But he was drafted ahead of Trey Lance.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Like the 2021 quarterback class was a rough one in hindsight. But yeah, it's I think flying under the radar, and I think the Patriots mentioned it before the season started, is a position that they like to be in. Mm-hmm. They like to play the underdog card. They played it even when they were like going 14-2 and heading into the AFC Championship game every year. They still tried to play the underdog card. But this time they really can do, because they don't have the star power that Tom Brady has. Justifiably or not, that's a different discussion altogether. But there are good players to be found, is what I'm saying. And Judon definitely is one of them, and definitely is, if you look at it from a Cowboys perspective, somebody you have to account for, somebody you cannot expect to just disappear or not have an impact on the game. Because if you don't account for him, as the Patriots will with Micah Parsons, for example, mm-hmm. he can wreck the game, and that's a quality that goes beyond star power, in my opinion. Just having a player who can turn the switch and change it in an instant.
No, that's really well said. And again, we are just a bit of time removed from. I'm a fan of Matthew Slater, but he's not a household name if he doesn't play for one of the greatest dynasties in the NFL. I mean, again, he's excellent at what he does, but like playing, and that happens. Like there's a lot of Chiefs who are more well known, like than they would be otherwise, because of the success that the team has as an overall operation. Again, that's just kind of life. You mentioned Micah Parsons. So we're recording this on Wednesday about 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. The Patriots had their first media session of the week right before we started talking. I saw you guys kind of getting stuff out. And Bill Belichick and Mac Jones spoke really glowingly of Micah Parsons, who you talked about. Micah kind of, I sort of predicted this on our side of things. Like, there are the occasional players who Belichick will like lavish with praise, and Micah certainly, and obviously he's hearkened to Lawrence Taylor, who's connected to Bill Belichick in his days with the New York Giants. Like, so it's just kind of like right up Bill's alley to just extol upon him, like all this football history and things like that. And Mac Jones said that he's the best player that they've gone up against this season. Again, I mean, I don't know what stock anybody puts into that. What's your level of fear? I mean, we all have teams that when we play them, or our teams play them, we're like, oh man, I'm really, really terrified of that dude or whatever. Like, where does I presume that Micah is pretty high up on your list, or obviously number one, but like, what are your overall kind of fears or worries about Micah Parsons as it relates to the Patriots on Sunday?
Well, I have to look at it from a Patriots perspective. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But the thing is,
you would. You're only here for your handsome, good looks, Bernd. We all know that.
That's true. But it's also a podcast, so people won't see me if they listen to it.
They
should listen though, and subscribe, and do all the funny stuff that
my man
that drives podcast traffic. But the thing is, if I look at it from a Patriots perspective, they have Trent Brown at left tackle. Mm-hmm. If he's on, he's really on. He can be a top 10, at minimum top 10 left tackle in the NFL. And he played that way against the very good New York Jets front last week. If we move over to right tackle, we have Calvin Anderson, who missed all of the summer due to an illness he described as very serious. We don't know what it is, but it kept him out the entire summer. He returned, played the first 2 games of the season, struggled, was replaced by Vadarian Lowe, who was acquired by a trade from the Minnesota Vikings ahead of of cutdown day. He started his first career game at right tackle against the Jets and was, well, what you would expect from a player who started his first career game against the New York Jets. So if I look at it from that perspective, and then seeing Micah Parsons, who is a freak on the other side of the line of scrimmage, I tend to be a bit worried. And the worry is not so much that the Patriots will just allow him to kill Mac Jones or burn every run play, but what the Patriots do, the famous tactic often mentioned is that the Patriots will not allow your best player to win the game. If we, like, that's a defensive mindset. Like, they will focus on taking away CeeDee Lamb. I'm getting ahead of myself here a bit, but they will do that. On the flip side, they will also try not to allow Micah Parsons to wreck the game. So what that means is they will probably use some chips on him, maybe bring a tight end in, which skews the numbers in the defense's favor. So Micah Parsons, even if he doesn't not rack up 3 sacks and forced fumble or whatever, like as he is capable of, he will have an impact on the game just because of his presence and because of what he is and what he can be. So that's what has me more worried than him sacking Mac Jones a million times. He can't do that, and he probably will get to him at one point because A, he's too good, and B, the Patriots' defensive line has been a little bit too shaky recently. But they will have to come up with a plan to slow him down, and that plan might ever so slightly shift what they want to do, and that plays into the defense's hands, and that can be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Micah serve as kind of a catalyst for, opening doors for success for other players on the defense, obviously, with all the attention that he absorbs. And so, every Cowboys fan kind of hopes that's the case if he is, kind of the primary focus of whoever it is on Sunday afternoon. So last week, shocker here, I do a stock report. And again, a very common SB Nation principle across all of our sites after every game. And one of my stock downs after the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals was Stephon Gilmore, which bummed me out. Like, I mean, it's just been such a cool story to have Stephon Gilmore be a part of this team. And it was so much fun to have him be this kind of running mate and older brother for Trayvon Diggs. And as you know, the Diggs injury happening last week. And so now, Gilmore, who's closer to the end of his career and certainly much further removed than his 2019 Defensive Player of the Year season that you love so much. Now he's thrusted into this, top premier, role that he was not acquired to fulfill. And I am worried about, and more worried than I thought I would be, about Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker, because the Cowboys secondary feels a bit vulnerable, with Gilmore, again, being in a bit of an uncomfortable position. Deron Bland, who the Cowboys had to kick outside in the aftermath of the injury, position he's not as familiar with. I do think, Kendrick Bourne had a big break for a touchdown after the Diggs pick 6 on Mac Jones in the game in New England 2 years ago. Like, I do worry that could be something that is there for the Patriots to be had. It feels like from afar, the Patriots offense has had, bits of success this year. I know last week against the Jets was kind of tough sledding, great defense, whatever. What are your thoughts on the New England offense through 3 weeks of the season?
I mean, the expectation was that they would run the ball and they would focus on the run game and set up play action. And then they came out and threw it 100 times over the first 2 weeks. So, there's New England works in mysterious ways. But if we're talking about the offense and what it can be, I do believe that Mac Jones can be a very good quarterback in this league. And I do believe the Patriots trust him to be a very good quarterback in this league. The thing when you look at the 2 of the last 3 games, the season opener against Philadelphia and last week's game against New York Jets, the weather was shit. Am I allowed to listen to this podcast, though?
Yeah, it's not the radio, so you're fine. We'll add the explicit tag and you'll be safe. So you're good.
Like rainy conditions, windy conditions. It wasn't really a pleasant environment to throw the football in. So we haven't really seen what they can do in a clean environment. And I'm not only speaking from the conditions, but also from the game script. They fell behind early against the Eagles. They
The
fell
Eagles, right?
against the Dolphins. They had to dig themselves out of a hole, had to rely on the passing game, and that is not what they want to be. Of course, throwing the football is, we all know, the most efficient way to move the ball down the field. But the thing is, the Patriots, they spoke about it last week, they want to be balanced, they want to run the football, they want to set up play action, and they haven't been able to do that, especially those first 2 weeks of the season where they had to rely on the passing game. Now comes week 3, they got more success on the ground, they set up the play action game a bit more. Mac Jones played an actually pretty good game. And it will be interesting to see how this develops. If they can limit mistakes, if they can keep turnovers at a minimum, ideally at 0, then they should be in a position to play the game on their own terms. They can focus on the running game, they can focus on those play action shots, and that in itself should make for a defense that functions a lot better than it looked like those first 3 weeks of the season. The worry to a degree is that the Patriots don't have a lot of firepower at the skill positions.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mac Jones and Hunter Henry have a good connection. Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne have a good connection. You saw it 2 years ago. And that hasn't changed since, even though the 2022 debacle under Matt Patricia tried to change that for some weird reason. But the thing is, Jones has good connections with certain players, but those players are not necessarily star players. Like if you speak about Stephon Gilmore being the number 1, who is he going up against? Like, who's the Patriots' number 1? On the outside, I would say it's Devonta Parker, but he's not a volume receiver. Like, they want Kendrick Bourne to beat it. They want Juju Smith-Schuster to beat it, even though he hasn't had a whole lot of success so far either. So if you look at it from the perspective, so who's the focus point? Who's the one wide receiver who gets the Gilmore treatment, quote unquote? It's probably Parker, but then again, is that really a mismatch that works in the Patriots' favor? I wouldn't say so, because Stephon Gilmore is still a good player and still a player who may not be at his peak athletic ability, but he's still a fundamentally sound cornerback who's as fine a technician as there is in the NFL still. And that's what might put the focus more on the other players that you mentioned, depth cornerbacks, the other starters in a way, and their matchups against the likes of a Juju Smith-Schuster, of rookie wide receiver Mario Douglas, who's been getting some momentum, and of Kendrick Bourne. It will be interesting to see how they match up. But going back to how I see the Patriots offense, they will try to run the ball. They will try to establish a presence and some balance in order to fully open the playbook and stress the defense in more than just one way.
So along those lines, we've made it now over 20 minutes into the conversation, and we haven't talked about Zeke. I don't know if you saw this early on Wednesday. Jerry Jones mentioned on the Home of the Cowboys 105 to the Fan that they would probably have some sort of, or he insinuated there would be some sort of honoring for Zeke Elliott, obviously a great player in Cowboys franchise history. I would imagine it's going to be something along the lines of just a video they play, probably narrated by Dak Prescott. You know, they've done similar things for, again, a very common thing across the NFL and sports in general. But it is Zeke's return. I don't know that there's any bad blood there. I think, Zeke and the Cowboys are kind of the poster for paying a running back and, the flaws associated with that. And, modern times, modern financial spending, blah, 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 blah. But there is a slight emotional component to this. And I think every Cowboys fan is really curious to see what Zeke Elliott's going to look like. So 2-part question. One, what are your early thoughts on Zeke Elliott as a member of the Patriots and how he has impacted this offense? And 2, what's your takeaway on him returning, obviously, to play the Cowboys? I mean, this kind of stuff is fun when it happens, but it often isn't as dramatic as the storyline kind of hypes it up to be.
To start with the second question, it reminds me of Tom Brady returning to New England in 2020 when he was with the Buccaneers. It was a big thing until it wasn't a big thing.
Right.
Like, as soon as the game started, I don't think Tom Brady really cared about it. I don't think Zeke Elliott would care about it. the difference may be like in-game interaction with the opponent because he knows a lot of people there, just like Brady did in New England.
Right.
But I don't think it will be a big thing for the players. Even though if the Cowboys do honor him in some way, I don't know how he would get the message, because he'd probably be in the locker room, then he would go through warm-ups, then he would go through the game, and they will ask him afterwards, hey, what do you think of that? And he will say, yeah, it was nice, but even though he didn't see it. Maybe, I don't know. But it won't be, I think everybody involved is professional enough that it won't get too far. And that will be the same with other players who go through a similar experience whenever it happens.
Right. When Mac Jones visits New England in the future, totally.
Yeah, as a quarterback of the Saskatchewan Rough Raiders or something.
Right.
No, I'm a believer. I'm a believer in Mac Jones until he proves me wrong, which might happen on Sunday already. No.
Right.
But the thing is, as for Zeke and his role within the Patriots offense, I had to back up a little bit. The Patriots entered the summer with Ramondre Stevenson as the number one back. Mm-hmm. He had a pretty good season. He led the team in rushing attempts and catches last year, but it was too much. Like, they just had to, due to injuries, they had to use him quite a bit. And the wheels kind of fell off toward the end of the season. And so they needed somebody to help replace him, give him a breather every now and then. And they drafted two guys last year, Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris. The hope was that they would become that. Harris is now in the practice squad. He's been released twice already since he entered the game, entered New England. Pierre Strong is now in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. So that tells you everything you need to know about that. There was a need to get somebody who could come in and contribute right away without much of a lead up time. And I think that's what appealed them to Elliott, that he has the experience and he has the knowledge, not just from a football perspective, also from a physical perspective. He knows how to get his body in shape to withstand, being run over by 300-pound dudes on a regular basis. And that's not an easy thing to do. I would die. You were probably better shape than I. You
no way.
Still get a serious injury. I don't know. But the thing is, Elliott knows that. Elliott is he's a pro. Like, he's been around. I think he spent 8 seasons in Dallas. He's been through all of it. And that's what made him popular in New England, is that he could come in and he could fill that role relatively early in his career with the Patriots. And he did that. He didn't see a lot of action in week 1. He had a fumble in a season opener against the Eagles. That was a rough play. But again, rainy conditions, things happen. Like, there's no running back that never fumbles. I mean, there was Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, Patriots legend. He never fumbled.
The law firm.
The law firm, yeah. Never fumbled in 3 years. Left the Patriots, immediately lost 2 fumbles in the game or something. But like, running backs fumble. And that it happened in the first game, yeah, it was unfortunate. But what can you do? The thing is, and that's something that I think also appealed to the Patriots, is he's professional enough that he can bounce back from that. Mm-hmm. And they know that, and they trust him to do that. And so they gave him a lot of carries even after that fumble. They gave him some carries the following week, and they really let him loose to a degree against the Jets. They wanted to establish that balanced presence, and so they relied on him. And he was their most productive runner. He averaged 5 yards a carry against a really good defense. And of course, running backs don't do it all by themselves. You know as well as I do that the O-line, the environment, like, a lot of factors go into a successful run play, as they do in a successful play at every level. And the thing is, he looked good. He's not like, he won't rush for 1,500 yards anymore. I think his rushing production decreased every year since he entered the league, and it probably will hit new lows this year. It might not. I can't predict the future. If I could, I probably wouldn't do podcasts, but sit on a Caribbean island and whatever. But he wasn't brought in to be all-pro Zeke Elliott rushing for 1,500 yards and scoring 20 touchdowns. He was brought in to help Ramondre Stevenson be fresher throughout the year and to give the team another presence in short yardage and pass protection situations that they otherwise simply didn't have. And so I think the Patriots are quite happy with what they've gotten from him, even though the numbers will maybe not be overwhelming, and people might be quick to look at those and say, he's washed, he's over the hill, which, I mean, there is a running back drop off after a certain number of carries. And that's to be expected. But the Patriots can live with that expectation. And as long as he can serve a complementary role, which he has so far, they will be happy with what he brings to the table.
I'm very interested. It's just, this was such a long time coming, and the Cowboys kept kind of having fun connecting themselves to him when he was still lingering in free agency. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how it all unfolds. I think that's really well said and assessed as far as his kind of standing within the team and the expectation, kind of brought in for his corporate knowledge. He's a really just incredibly football smart player. Back to kind of the Micah thing, I can totally see how that would be appealing to Bill Belichick. And again, in this point, the twilight of his career, whatever you want to call it, I think that he can certainly provide a lot of value. So I think every Cowboys fan is rooting for him outside of this particular Sunday. I mentioned that we're recording on Wednesday, but the time has come nevertheless, Bernd, I don't need an actual prediction, but just kind of a general, this is the way I see this game unfolding more often than not. I mean, the Cowboys are heavy favorites, but they were 12.5-point favorites last week and got blown out by 12 points against the Cardinals. So anything can happen. So what do you think is going to happen? Tell us, predict it, so that you can get your stock and head on out to the Caribbean, like you said.
I would say, I don't know where the over-under is set. I'm not a big betting guy, but probably take the under. The thing is, the Patriots, they have a pretty good defense. The Cowboys have a pretty good defense. Both offenses, if they are on their game, can be very good. But are they? Will they? Brian Schottenheimer is an experienced, good offensive coordinator. But the Patriots are a pretty good defense. I can see them limit the Cowboys and take away CD Lamb and see what else they got. I know they got a lot of talent. Like Michael Gallup's a good receiver. Brandon Cooks, former Patriot, good receiver. But they haven't really popped so far this season, I would say. I think Cooks is like 4 catches for a handful of yards. So the Patriots will try to force the Cowboys into their secondary and tertiary options to see what they can do. And that might lead to a lower scoring game that people might anticipate. And that's the Patriots probably comfortable playing that game. The question is, of course, who will emerge victoriously in such a setting?
That's the question you have to answer, Bernd. That's why you're here.
And I would say as much as I would love to just see Mac Jones go off and boom, go 2007 Tom Brady on the Cowboys, I don't see that happening, to be quite honest. I think the Cowboys will win just because they are a really talented team on both sides of the ball and on special teams. And the key difference when I look back at the season so far, the Cowboys have the best turnover differential in the NFL at +6, I believe.
Correct.
The Patriots are, I think, at -2. They didn't have any turnovers against the Jets. They didn't record any either. So
right.
There was a no-sum game from that perspective. But so far, the Patriots have not proven to me that they can play a clean game. And the Cowboys, yes, they slipped against the Cardinals. Yes, they played against Zach Wilson and the Jets, and they absolutely smoked the Giants. That was I didn't when I saw the score, I didn't believe it.
It was that kind of game. It was a really not believable game. It was fake, honestly.
It was as soon as that first Giants drive stalled,
right?
They just fell apart.
It was beautiful.
I have to agree with that. The Giants are not necessarily the most popular team.
Sure, that's
in New England for reasons I'd never understood, because they never met in any noticeable games as far as I can remember.
Right. Not
But
2007 Tom Brady knows nothing about that. Right.
no, absolutely not. But the thing is, the Cowboys are a very talented team. They haven't made the mistakes yet, I think, that the Patriots have made, and they are not prone to making those mistakes. And as you said, any given Sunday, we all know the cliches around that, and anything can happen. But just based on what we know, I would give the Cowboys an edge. Will it be a 7-point edge, as is, I think, predicted by the odds makers? I'm not so sure about that. But playing at home, having a really good team, going against an offensive line that has had its ups and downs, I think they will make, like Micah Parsons will maybe make one play too much for the Patriots to overcome, and in the end, it will be competitive, but I see the Cowboys prevailing.
I hope you're right. Just to kind of appease you, since I'm sure that answer didn't. This is a matchup of two teams whose last win for each of them was against the New York Jets. So each team playing in this game on Sunday, their last win came against the Jets. So this is just really a bag on the Jets kind of show. Bernd Buchmasser. How was that? Was it closer?
That was very good. That was really good.
I mean, like,
you getting it.
I felt confident in my abilities before we started, but I did have like a little bit of hesitation. That time right there, I felt way more confident. Like zero hesitation.
That was sniffing out a screen pass and just blowing up the ball carrier.
Matt Judon would be proud. Micah Parsons would be proud.
Absolutely, and you're wearing red, so he would be proud of that as well.
That's true. This red is in support of the United States. Bernd, it's Ryder Cup week. I mean, I don't know that we've ever talked golf. I don't know that you're a golf fan. Are you a golf fan?
Not really. I wouldn't say that I'm a golf fan. I'm like more of a casual golf observer.
Are you a fan of Europe?
I'm not a fan of Europe. That's a complicated question.
Well, we did
really start 2 world wars.
Okay, all I'm saying is this is the United States versus Europe. So pick a side. Yeah. That's really what this is about, even if you don't like golf. Yeah.
I think without having much of a knowledge when it comes to golf, I think the United States will win.
So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you don't. Again, we haven't talked about this. This was kind of not planned, but the Ryder Cup is a biannual event that switches of like venues. It's in the United States, and then 2 years later it's on European soil. The United States have not won in Europe since 1993. Just something about the home field advantage. So, and it's in Europe this week in Rome. So tough scene for the Americans. Have you seen that show, The Americans? How about that?
Have I seen the show The Americans? No, I have not. I work with the Americans. That's what I do.
You do.
I don't need a show.
It's actually funny because it's kind of like not about Americans. But it is and it isn't. It's worth a watch. The wife and I didn't finish it. We just got busy with stuff, but we got like 3 seasons in. It's interesting. It's probably on Amazon Prime or something like that. So when you're not watching Thursday Night Football, check it out. Yeah.
Maybe I'll give it a good.
Bernd, before you leave, how about you give us a show recommendation? What's something that we should watch that is accessible for us?
Show recommendation. I gotta be honest. I'm not watching a lot of shows.
Okay, movie, Bernd, books, any form of leisure.
But one show I recently watched was The Great, about Russian Empress Catherine the Great. It is more of a comedic take on history. I wouldn't call it accurate in any sense or form, but it's lighthearted fun, and it's like the actors are good as far as I can judge. I have no idea if actors are good or bad, but it looks good, and it looks and it's fun. It's lighthearted. It's something to get your mind off if you have to cover the NFL for 24 hours a day. I followed Tom Brady for quite some time, so I know about The Great, and at least from that perspective, that's a good connection to have.
Did you? This is my last question. Did you watch? Was it 80 for Brady? Was the name? Did you watch that for work purposes?
No.
Wow.
One of my colleagues, Pat Lane, who's a writer for Pat's Pulpit, I think he watched it, and I think he said it was fun. But nothing overly exciting. Wow. So I don't know. I feel like I've had enough of my share of Tom Brady.
That's a fair take. Bernd,
As have all NFL fans probably.
You know, I'm at the point with Tom Brady where the content is interesting and I am not bothered. Maybe it's the fact that the Cowboys finally got one over on him and are the last team to ever beat him. So I've got that like teeny tiny little bit of pride. And that's who Mike McCarthy is. He's the dude who's kind of like brought ends to curses like that. When the Cowboys won in New England, they'd never beaten the Bill Belichick Patriots. They haven't beaten the Patriots at home since 1996. So that game, I believe the final score was 12-6. So hopefully this week's is a lot more entertaining than that. That would say.
Maybe they should send Mike McCarthy to the Ryder Cup this week.
That's a great idea. It'd be difficult timing, obviously on Sunday, but you know, send him to Rome, get on the jet. You know what I mean? Like it's a 3:25 kick Central. You know what I mean? Like he'll have time. I mean,
plenty of time.
Right. Good call. We'll work on that, getting Mike McCarthy out to cheer on the Americans, not the television show. Everybody can check out the great off of Bernd's recommendation. If you don't like it, or if you do like it, tweet at him at Bernd Buchmasser. Again, 1 to 10. Give me a grade on that one.
I would say solid 8.
8 for Ochoa. That's me. That's a good play by you. Bernd, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Have a wonderful day, or else. We'll see you next.
You too.